This is the other magic beanie. The Joey magic beanie has flown away. I don't know where. It went back to beanie heaven or something. So this is magic beanie number 2. This is going to be an evening muse because it's not morning. Too bright? Too dim? Too bright? Too dim? Too bright? We'll stay with too bright. Yolanda had an interesting experience with her mirror meditation. It reminded me of that video I made. It was one of the first AUG response videos. It was about the movie Brainstorm, and for some reason, I don't know why, I also put meditate in a mirror in the title. I mean, I think I do know why, but I don't know why I decided to pair those two. But the reason I put that in the title was because I did that meditation in a mirror. And nobody told me to do it. I didn't read about it somewhere. I just, I think I've done it before. I didn't have as drastic of an experience as Yolanda did, but I was describing it to her. It was you start seeing your face change, but it's also not changing at the same time. It's a very strange sensation. There's something about the human face that, if you're looking at it for long enough, it will, it's a portal. It's not the mirror that's the portal, it's the face. Like Yolanda was saying, it's the eyes. Whether it's yourself or somebody else, if you do it with another person, in person, it's more powerful than the mirror. But you have to be at or near the same frequency for it to work. But it's the same as any psychedelics. The same thing. Depending on your emotional state, it's depending on how stable you are. If you're unstable, you're gonna see some scary things in the face. If you're stable, you may see some scary things, but it won't knock you off center. It will simply be observed, and then it will change into something else. But it's the same thing. You need to make sure you're protected. You need to make sure your energy is correct as you're going into it. You need to close it off after you're done. And like psychedelic trips or mushroom trips or LSD, peyote, DMT, ayahuasca, any of those, it's the same thing. You need to treat it with respect and care, and don't just go into it as some sort of a high, because when you do that, that's usually what onsets the bad trips. Once you, at a certain point, you just get the understanding that all of existence is some level of being high. Like there's not a baseline. There are temporary baselines, but in an infinite reality, how could there ever be a baseline that lasts? It's not necessary. It becomes all relative anyway. Just like Inception, if you're going up and down levels, at what point does the previous center need to remain the center for all of it? Any one of them can, in an infinite timeline, what has been first established as the middle, okay, once you move a couple rungs off to the right, that's the new middle, okay? So, really, whatever level you're on, whatever dimension you're on, whatever reality system you're on, that is baseline for that period of time, and then you can go up or down and come back to it for as long as you're primarily in that baseline. But you don't have to stay there. It's just that in an infinite existence, there's no reason for any particular seeming baseline not to last for a couple billion years or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It may feel like we've been here in the Earth baseline for a really long time, and we probably have, but it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. As you refine your experience, as you refine your awareness, the others, it's like climbing a mountain. You know, at the base you have all the cities, and you have the towns, and you have all of the people. And you start climbing, you know, you get to the base of the mountain, there's less people, and you start climbing up, there's fewer and fewer people. And once you get near the top, you only see like one or two here and there. And that's exactly how it is with going within. That's all it is. You're going within your experience rather than you're contracting the future past attention. And the more you bring that to center line as often as you can, the more refined your awareness becomes, and the less that anything material or anything projection matters. And if you're with somebody else who's talking on those things primarily, you don't get anything from it anymore. There's just a certain quality of consciousness that occurs after you've done enough introspection that is recognizable and needed by others who are at or near the same level. And the people who aren't, or the so-called sleepers, they don't do anything whatsoever for you. And they start, you know, they fall off. They don't stick around. Somebody made a comment on a video, I forgot what video it was. I think it maybe was Matt's. But they made a comment that beings on the outside of this particular reality system view it as a simulation. And they think it's hilarious if anybody inside of this system is getting upset about anything that's appearing to happen within the system, because from the outside they see that it's a mental play essentially, and that you don't die, you just pop on out of it when the body dies or whatever happens. And that's something that you, I'm sure, remember every time you die after the trauma has been passed through. You remember, oh, that was just a character. It was a story that I was living. I was incarnating the story. And part of the story was the notion that that was the only reality, and that once I died, that was going to be it, or else I was going to go to just one or two places called heaven or hell, if my storyline had me being a devout religious person. And the thing is if your story is set to take you there, to take you down that devout religious person experience, it doesn't matter how many people are trying to wake you up. If that's not what it's going to be, that's not what it's going to be. You're not going to see it. You're not going to get it. I was talking with my brother a couple days ago, my oldest brother, and we were talking about the idea of free will and determinism, which is kind of a fascinating topic. And he's of the belief that there is no free will whatsoever here, not a shred. That's essentially a joke, or it's just something to make the ego feel important, or to make it's really for the ego. The idea of control is for the ego, because for control even to exist as even as a thought form, even as a hypothetical, for that to exist, there has to be some separate entity. That goes back to the puppet master, the guy up there doing this. You know, there's a guy doing this, and then there's the little puppet down there with his arms and legs attached to strings. So then the puppet master is the ego, and the little guy is, you know, the body that the ego is controlling, or apparently controlling. But like I was telling my brother, it always goes back to infinite regress. You cannot escape it. Because it always goes back to, well, who's controlling the guy that's pulling the puppet strings? And then who's controlling that guy? If you're going to have a control, the control always has to be backed up, and it's infinite. It never ends. And even if you get all the way up the top and you finally arrive at God is this separate entity that's pulling all the strings, then you have to say, who's controlling God? If you're going to go down that path, you have to ask that question. Well, nobody's controlling God. Well, who created God? Well, nobody created God. He was just always there. Well, if you have the story of creation, it's got to apply to everything. Why would you neglect a piece? If you're going to piece out the universe, it's got to apply to all of it. So after you back it up and back it up and back it up, you back the control mechanism further and further away. Eventually, you have a bunch of people who have delegated all of their power out to this outside being who they don't even know where or who it is. And eventually you come full circle and you're like, oh, okay, well, this is this and this is simple. I don't even need to imagine a separate controller. It's just like my arms and legs and hands, they move when I want them to, and that's all there is to it. And that's as much of a notion of control that I need. I don't need any more than that. In fact, even having that idea is as well unnecessary. Why do you need that idea of control? Why do you need to separate out the action that's happening from a separate puppet master? Why do you need to do that? You don't. It happens regardless. And there's no way to verify if you have control, because you don't even know what you is. If you haven't done that introspection, if you haven't yet searched deeply inside of the body, and then once you look in there for long enough and find out, well, I can't find who's in control, I just see that the body is moving and acting intelligently, then you look outside for some control mechanism, and you cannot find it. You never find it. Everything just happens, and it moves perfectly, and that's all there is to it. It's very simple. It's when we try to develop these theories, these models of the universe, that's when we start going wrong. Essentially, you're going wrong when you're doing that. It is a whole. It's not pieced out until you start dividing and chopping up, and we chop with the words. Each word is a chop, 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 chop. You're chopping up the reality, and then you look at it with the mental overlay instead of deeply experiencing every single aspect of your reality as it's happening. And also doing this chopping and living primarily in the mind, in the left brain, in the mental, that excludes you from everything. It just cuts you off. The whole existence is here and now. It's never been anything other than that. And there's nothing you can do about that. You can't do anything about it. Except for escape off into projection land, and where it feels like you're doing something when you're not. You're still not. You're daydreaming. You're daydreaming within the daydream of life. It's a kind of an extraordinary thing that we have managed to take an infinite existence and pare it down into to pay your taxes. How have we pared it down into money? I mean, it's really amazing. But you can't really fault that for happening, because in an infinite existence, anything can and will happen. It just simply does. It doesn't mean it happens incorrectly. It just means that it will. Every single thought form that you can conjure up in your head is some sort of a parallel reality, or else you'll draw some of it into this current reality. All of it exists, though. And it all exists now. And it's paradoxical, it's absurd, it's hard to understand. It's meaningless until you add meaning. For me, it's exploration. That's what I primarily like to do, is exploring. And I mean exploring the inner, not exploring like the physical world, even though I like doing that as well. The inner is so much more nuanced. That's also why we're so entrained in the mind system. And if you believe the idea that we have this given alien mind that is feeding in this parasitic relationship, well, the mind is fucking fascinating. It is. It's endless. And maybe we're so in love with that alien mind that we have, and it's so fascinating that even if it's eating us, we're willing to make that sacrifice. That's a very real possibility. If you were to take a day, if you were to take one whole day, 24 hours, and you managed to live that entire 24 hours in the present moment as much as possible, without having plans, without having your conditioning, without having your routines, without having all these set things that normally happen, it would be as if you lived an entire lifetime in 24 hours. That's the depth that you would find in that 24 hours. If you can do it for an hour, it's the same thing. Introspection is endless. Endless. It's just the projection stuff. It's the planning stuff. That's the constricted, the contracted, the gross level of experience, and that's where most people spend their time. That's why when you start elevating, when you start becoming more nuanced, you can't spend your time around those people, because you already know exactly everything that they're doing and saying. You've seen the whole lifetimes of it. Like being around my parents or some of the siblings that are still on that path. I know everything that they're allowing themselves to be. So in the constriction that they've done, I know all of it. I've heard all of it. I've heard every single thing that they've ever said. And it's like reliving the past every time I'm talking to them. And so that's not feeding my soul. My soul needs a dynamic newness all the time. It needs the muse. I won't settle for anything less than that. And that includes everybody that I come into contact with. If they have that fresh scent of open awareness, of allowing, of serenity, then I'm attracted to them. And if not, it's exactly the same thing as like watching a rerun on television. Why would you want to do that unless you just love comfort so much that you like doing the same thing all the time? I can't do it. And even so, those people that are doing that, they still serve a purpose for us, because they create this tension, this pressure to break out even more into the unknown. After a while, it's like, oh my God, I can't do this. I have to explode out somehow. I have to. So they're actually acting as a catalyst to push you further. It's not just a bad thing for the sleepers to be communicating with you. It's not bad. For the people that believe there's a real world, you know? For the people that still believe there's a real world, well, guess what? Their real world is totally known. They know all of it. And if you've talked with them long enough, you know the whole thing too. And it's probably boring as fuck. You probably can't fit inside their real world. So they block off the parts of you that don't fit in there. They denounce those parts. You feel the denunciation or renunciation of those parts. And, you know, it's a pressure cooker. It starts cooking you up. And eventually you gotta explode out somewhere. There's no other way. The infinite is present. Always. Always. Once you've seen it, once you've caught the scent, it's over. You can't go back from that. You can't go back to the known. You can't go back to patterns and routines. It's impossible. You've found what's actually alive. And it's outside of all of that. All of those patterns and routines and deadness. All the deadness that we've created here, all the unnecessary garbage all over the landscape, it's nothing. It's literally nothing. It's not even a problem. It's just funny. It's funny that there are so many people putting energy into these things, into these paradigms that are, they're deadening and vampiric. They don't serve the human soul whatsoever. It just eats everything. You can see it in their faces too. Like, you know an alive person when you see them, they have that mystique about them. There's something in them that calls out to you that's not with words. Endless fascination. also say that we came here as well. In infinity, it's possible to experience a finite existence. Because you can't exclude anything. If you're dealing with infinity, everything is there in some capacity. All of it. Every new thing that comes up in you is there. All is allowed. Every bit. And it's not a restriction. I remember at one point in my path, I had this, I looked at this notion of everything is here, everything is allowed, it's infinite, it's never ending. And I had this idea that I had to personally experience all of the things I had ever heard of, all the things I had ever thought of, all the things I had ever experienced. I thought I must do all those things, essentially all the atrocities that I've heard. Well, if I'm an infinite being, I must live through all of those. I must have lived through all of those. But there's a saving grace in there that I didn't know about, and that's that notion that I just said. I must experience everything. That's excluding the possibility of me not having to do that. You see what I'm saying? And then I just started laughing. It's hilarious. It really is. It's funny. The sticks, the mud that we walk into. You know? And some way along the road, you learn what compassion is. You learn what it actually is. You see it, you feel it. You experience traumas and things, and you just get flash insights of what it actually means. What does compassion actually mean? Exploration is infinite, completely infinite. All this outside stuff is the inner exploration. It's just a gross version of it. It's solidified thoughts, as simple as that. The thoughts that you have are malleable and fluid. This here is a somewhat solidified version of thought. It's not actually solidified. It's matter is thoughts and energy pretending to be solid for a bit, and then it stops. It doesn't actually stop, but you know what I'm saying. That particular pretense falls away. It all falls away eventually, and then something else comes in. Who knows what's coming in? It's endless. That's enough for tonight. Thanks for spending this another half an hour with me. I expect once I hit 1 million minutes watched, I'll probably mention it. That would be kind of a cool milestone. I mean, I'm already a fifth of the way there. Doesn't like me going slow in the fast lane. Sorry, buddy. Endless. Be endless. Be infinite in a finite world. calm within the paradoxes. Make meaning within the absurd. What else to do? Nighty-night. Sleep tight. Have some nice dreams. Write down your dreams. Dreaming is a level up.